Hello everyone. Today I'm going to do a review of the first book in Agatha Christie's Miss Marple detective series, Murder at the Vicarage. I've been reading a lot of Hercule Poirot mysteries the past few years, so I wanted to broaden my horizons to other books by the same author. As I often do with Agatha Christie or other mystery reviews, I'm going to kick it off without any spoilers for the first half, and then in the second half I'll warn you when I'm about to get into the spoilery section, including the investigation process and the solution. Christie published this novel in 1930. I think in terms of Christie's writing that placed it amidst some of the earlier Poirot novels, specifically between Murder on the Blue Train and Peril at End House, two novels that I liked a lot. And I'll come right out and say, I also really enjoyed this novel. I felt like I was getting too used to the pattern of Hercule Poirot novels and needed something just a bit different for this one. And while the novel still contains much of Christie's signature style, it was at least different enough to satisfy my need for something just a bit different. Now, Murder at the Vicarage is a typical English village mystery by today's standards, and yet it's done so well. That's partly because Agatha Christie set the scene for what even is typical, but yeah. No fancy vacation destinations or gimmicks or any of that stuff, which means she had to do it well and she had to do it right. And that she did. This novel features Christie's new detective, Miss Marple. She's an elderly spinster lady and town gossip, unlike Christie's hilariously pompous, center of attention Belgian detective Hercule Poirot, and she's content to sneak around on the side, modestly figuring stuff out from the safety and the excellent vantage point of her garden. We don't hear that much from Miss Marple, though, in the first half of the novel. We hear more of her from other characters, many of whom express a dislike for her because she seems to know more than she should and sometimes draws less than flattering conclusions about her neighbors, even if they do happen to always be correct. She's also quick to say what everyone's thinking, even when it's something others find best left unsaid. Still, we get to know her later in the novel and get more of a peek at her personality that we're sure to see more of in Adventures to Follow. This general initial dislike of Miss Marple even extends to our narrator of the novel, the vicar Reverend Clement, who you'll quickly deduce from the title of the novel, will find himself in the unpleasant situation of having a murder committed at his vicarage. The vicar's narration was for me an important feature, distinguishing this novel from others of Christie's. He's a solidly written character and shapes the reader's perspective a lot, but not too aggressively. He's pretty likable, and even if he's not able to piece everything together immediately, we get a sense that we're working with him instead of sort of working against him. Contrast this with some of the Poirot novels, narrated by the lovable but buffoonish Captain Hastings, in which we should probably immediately rule out just about anything that the overconfident Hastings suggests. The vicar also benefits from being a confidant of many others in the village, which allows him, and us readers through his eyes, to gather information in a way that seems natural and doesn't involve the sneaking around that Hastings often employs to try to get a step ahead of Poirot. Now, what about the other characters? There are quite a few of them, and unfortunately I wouldn't say they're all that interesting, aside from the vicar and Miss Marple. They are at least good enough characters, though, and for me, they at least didn't fall so far into the common character tropes that it was distracting. And we do also get a character named Dennis who plays tennis, so that's a plus. Before getting into any of the spoilery details, I'll also just talk for a second about the mystery itself on a high level. One thing that struck me early while reading was the sheer amount of evidence and hearsay to keep track of. As much as anything else, this mystery felt like a bit of a memory challenge. There were several clear leads at any given time, not to mention some loose ends that were no longer the center of our attention, but we knew shouldn't be completely forgotten. Some readers will love this, and others not so much. I liked it because it gave some variety, but I'm glad not every Agatha Christie mystery involves filing and re-accessing so many different leads. I'd also argue that Christie could have made it easier on the readers without detracting from the mystery at all. A lot of the characters come up really fast at the beginning of the novel, making it hard for us to remember the important stuff that's been said about them before we even have a great sense of who they are. And it's always frustrating when 2 hours into a mystery novel, we're interviewing a character who was introduced to us in the first 15 minutes, but we know we've forgotten a lot about them because we couldn't tell at the time they were introduced if they were actually important enough to merit that special attention. Now that's all I've got for the spoiler-free section, so if you're planning to read this book but still haven't done so yet, thanks for watching, and here's your cue to come back later when you're finished. Alright, spoilers beginning. This mystery is complicated. In fact, this was one main point of criticism when the book was first published, and Christie herself said later in her life that there was too much going on in this mystery, and in hindsight this was a flaw. In addition to having a lot of characters to keep track of, there are also a lot of different mystery threads going on at the same time. Our task as readers is to figure out for each piece of information which thread it belongs to, and then to figure out whether these threads are all interwoven in one big mega mystery, or if some of them are simply parallel threads that have no real bearing on the actual murder plot, other than to confuse us by happening at the same time. This can be fun or not, depending on the style of mystery you like, but I'm just going to go with it here and explore what that means from a reader's perspective. With a mystery so complicated, it requires not only solid memory, as I mentioned before, but also some stellar focus and prioritization. For this very reason, this book might bring you closer to feeling like a true detective with an open-ended case, being able to sort through a bunch of different piles of leads, than it would in some other mysteries where there's a single critical clue that says everything you need to know. Here, there's just far too much going on with too many combinations of possible crazy theories and explanations for us to consider every single possibility. We have to selectively focus on a few of our most promising leads and file away all other tidbits in the background, ready to pull them out later if they become relevant. And I don't know about you, but in at least a few instances, I filed away a clue a little too nicely to the point where I just totally forgot about it by the end. The defacing of the portrait in Anne Prothero's storage room was one such clue that obviously caught my suspicion, but that I forgot to return to. Of course, one downside to all this mental filing of clues in this particular novel is that a lot of it is pure distraction with no bearing on the main plot. Understanding, for example, why that portrait in the storage room was defaced would not have actually helped me to identify the murderer. It would have just helped to clarify things by explaining away some of the other red herrings we've seen that are vaguely casting suspicion on other characters. This mystery is like 20% main murder plot and 80% overlapping red herrings. We can never be certain that all of these overlapping plot threads aren't directly relevant to the murder, but also we can expect that at least some of them are not, because it would be quite a coincidence if they all were. In fact, if you wanted to have any shot at solving this mystery whatsoever, I think you'd probably have to trust in Agatha Christie to have written a solution that doesn't involve too much coincidence, and that actually is more likely than other crazy theories. Which she sort of does, although there's still a fair amount of unfortunate coincidences in timing. And on that subject of time, I have to mention one big aspect of the investigation that I just really didn't like here, which was the repeated attention to clocks and timing. There was a lot of shenanigans with clocks and times that was difficult to follow and sometimes annoying. For example, there's this sticky point of emphasis on a clock that was intentionally kept set at the wrong time, forcing us to figure out who would have known that the clock was wrong, and then would that person have known that other people knew that they knew that the clock was wrong. This felt like complication for the sake of complication, and not only that, but I found myself on the audiobook having to rewind and listen to one of the earlier explanations of this like 5 times to figure out what the situation was. Because when there's a clock irregularity in a mystery novel, as we know, whether you find it interesting or not, it's just not a maybe a clue thing. You know it's a clue, and that it's going to be important, which means you just can't let it slide and wait for someone to bring it up again later. And for all this trouble, we still get a murder that was committed in an improbably short amount of time, as many critics pointed out, which I'm normally cool with, but here I do have to admit it makes us wonder why we bothered trying to piece together the timing. Okay, so let's get to the final reveal, the solution. Was I able to piece it all together? As I was thinking about this book afterwards, I identified what I think of as at least 5 different plot threads. We have the main one, murder at the Vicarage. I was onto the answer for this one at first, like in the first third of the book, but I have to confess I was thrown off by all the other distractions. Although minor, this is probably a little strike against the book because I think a solid mystery should keep us thinking and gathering more info during the book. But this one is perhaps the kind of mystery where you're more likely to know the murder if you just kind of turn off your brain after the first third and play the I'm not listening game until the very end, avoiding the temptation to get stuck in all these side distractions. The diversions include Number 1, the suitcase in the woods, or the fake archaeologist plot. I had little idea what was going on with this one. I assumed things were maybe being stolen from the archaeological site, but I wasn't sure exactly who was stealing them. There was number 2, the Lestrange's Lettuce's mother plot. With a hacked up picture in the attic, I assumed it was someone we weren't supposed to recognize, and actually was maybe closer on this than I thought, but never really put the pieces together and unfortunately forgot about this in the end. We had number 3, the prank calls to Mrs. Price Ridley plot, which turned out to not really be a full plot thread, and also not as closely entangled with number 4, the embezzling church funds plot, as I thought. You see, for a while I thought that the vicar's wife, Griselda, was embezzling the funds. I was quite suspicious of her, actually for various reasons, though I didn't think that she was the murderer in this case. It turns out, though, that she was just the prank caller, mad at Mrs. Price Ridley for spreading false rumors here. And then there were a few plot threads, I'll just call them together thread 5, hinting of people having affairs on the side, most of which turned out to be nasty gossip and speculation that merely led us astray. Except for, of course, one of them that was a real affair, with Lawrence Redding and Anne Prothero, but probably luckily this thread is mostly resolved within the first half of the novel, even though there are some loose ends that we're going to keep thinking about until the final conclusion. All these threads thrown in there were effective in disguising the actual clues. For example, when the vicar encounters Redding playing amateur detective, many of us will think this is weird, but think nothing much more of it because we're oversaturated with leads at the time. So without further ado, the solution. I thought the ending was solid. It was one where I felt like, yes, you got me. I should have seen it, and I did see it from the very start. But then I quickly got lost amidst all the confusion and third-party confirmations that Lawrence Redding and Anne Prothero were probably innocent. When Lawrence turns himself in at the very beginning, it's wise for us to suspect that unless he's really shielding someone, which we quickly learn would not have really been that useful anyway, he's playing a long game and could actually be guilty. But then Anne goes and turns herself in too, and I think, well, this won't do. This is bogus. I'm just on the wrong track completely. Anne's confession at this point is clearly bogus, subtly implying that Lawrence Redding's confession is also bogus. The main investigators, including the narrator, seem to think the same, and without really understanding all the details of why this happened, they kind of move on and treat it as all tidied up, even though it really is not sufficiently explained. But readers may, as I did, just sort of agree with them and begin placing our suspicions elsewhere. But the truth remains that in all our other investigations, we don't see anyone else who really would have had a strong enough motive for murder, or any opportunity of committing it. And that's why ultimately, despite its occasional overcomplication, the mystery itself in this novel was really solid, and I give Christie full credit for leading me astray in the right sort of way. What about you though? Did you figure this one out? I suspect that some of you did. What clued you in if so, or was it just a hunch? And if you didn't figure it out, who was your top suspect? Let me know what you thought. Coming up soon, I'm also going to do a review of Sad Cypress, another Agatha Christie mystery that I enjoyed quite a lot, this one featuring Hercule Poirot again. But until then, bye, and happy reading.